I wanted to comment a little bit about today's gospel reading. Notice how our Lord, the harshness he uses, the harsh words that he uses against the scribes and the Pharisees. And he says basically, you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. And he says that they make them, when they make a convert, they make them twice as much a child of hell as themselves. So he's saying they are children of hell, basically children of the devil. And there's another passage where our Lord, he says that to them, that they are children of the devil, who's the father of lies. So in other words, whenever deception is used, it's a kind of hypocrisy. So when we think of hypocrisy, a hypocrite is someone who claims one thing but acts differently. Now, in one sense, we are all hypocrites because we know we're called to live up to a standard. We believe in that standard. We all fall short, but we don't do it on purpose. We do it out of weakness. Whereas with these scribes and these Pharisees, it's kind of like they knew, but they still continued along their ways. And our Lord kind of makes it clear why they are the way that they are by referring to, whoever swears by the sanctuary is bound by nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the sanctuary is bound by the oath. In other words, this was the belief or the principle used by some of these scribes and Pharisees. And if you think about it, same as with, the gift on the altar or the altar. So for them, the gift was more important than the altar. And some commentators will say, well, the reason that the Jewish leaders had this view or this mentality is because if, for example, you were to go back on your promise or your oath, well, the gold of the temple could be used as compensation, or the gift on the altar could be used as compensation to pay back the person that you had forfeited your promise to. Whereas the altar, it doesn't belong to you. You can't do anything about it, right? Same as with the temple. It doesn't belong to you. You can't take bricks from the temple and give it to someone as kind of repayment for going against your oath. So part of their focus on the gift or the gold of the temple was this reason. But others point out that it wasn't the only thing, but rather they were focused on worldly things, so gold, treasure, and the gifts, right, as opposed to the temple or the altar that makes the gift holy. In other words, they weren't so focused on God, they were focused on worldly things. And it is true that for many of the Jewish people, before the time of Christ, the view that they had is that if you had a good relationship with God, God would bless you and you would prosper in a worldly sense. Now, of course, this doesn't happen all the time, and the worldly riches, worldly prosperity lasts only for a while. But there was this kind of common view at that time, and still is present amongst many Christians, including some Catholics. They think, oh, well, I'm a good Catholic, everything should go well for me, and when it doesn't, they complain to God, and sometimes they even rebel against God. Why would God allow such a bad thing to happen to me or to my loved one? So it's important that we correct this wrong view and remind ourselves that the most important thing is God and our relationship with Him, whether we are prospering or not, whether we are healthy and whole or suffering or even on the point of death, that we always trust in God. This is the most important thing. Now today we celebrate the feast of the Queenship of Our Lady. And today is actually the octave day after the celebration of the Assumption, which we had last Monday, so 8 days after. And it's just like in the Rosary, right? It's the last mystery, the crowning of Our Lady as Queen of Heaven and Earth. And it's a great feast, and it kind of reminds us of Mary's role in bringing about our salvation. So in other words, she's deserving of this great honor. She's deserving of this great dignity because of her yes to God when the angel Gabriel came, but also because of her continued yes to God, even as she stood at the foot of the cross. In other words, she gives an example to us in the midst of our sufferings, or when we see our sufferings, or when we see our loved ones suffering, we shouldn't complain, why is this happening to me? In other words, we need to trust no matter what. But when we think of the queenship of Mary, it's also a reminder to us that next to Christ, Our Lady is basically to the right hand of our Lord. And so she is the greatest of all the saints. We could say the next greatest saint would be Saint Joseph, and the reason is because of the love and closeness that they had with our Lord. But when we think of the queenship of Mary, and especially when we say that she's the queen of heaven and earth, well, what exactly does that entail? How does she use her authority as queen, or what sort of authority does she have as queen? So, of course, she is totally obedient to God and only does those things that are pleasing to God. Now, of course, she's free because she's a human being. And she wants to honor God, she wants to serve God, and she wants to do those things that God desires. Just yesterday we mentioned that God desires the salvation of all men. And so Mary desires the salvation of all men. And so Mary will do what she can to bring about the salvation of all men, including obtaining graces for individuals who are in need of graces. One of our Lady's titles is the Refuge of Sinners. Imagine someone who may be struggling with addiction to mortal sin, or they just, they're so addicted to one particular mortal sin they have a hard time pulling themselves away from it. Well, they need to turn to Our Lady. Our Lady can obtain the graces that they need. Sure, they need to make the effort, they need to work hard, they need to struggle against their sinful inclinations, but Our Lady will help them. God will, of course, also, but she's our greatest intercessor. So when we have Our Lady interceding, it makes everything more fruitful. And the analogy that St. Louis Marie de Montfort gives is, we are like poor paupers. And imagine a poor pauper going to the king, trying to obtain a favor from the king. Well, he knows he should give some honor or maybe a gift to the king to try to win his favor, so he gets an apple, and he takes the apple with his dirty hands and his rags, and he's filthy, and he presents it to the king. But of course the king is not going to be too pleased with that. I'm talking about an earthly king here, right? But if the pauper goes first to the queen and wins the favor of the queen and says, I'd like to get this favor from the king, and here's an apple, a sacrifice, a gift I'm making to him, and she says, okay, let me take your request, let me take your gift, and I'll present it to the king. So she takes the apple, she puts it on a silver tray, or if you want, a gold tray, and she surrounds it with grapes and other fruits, and in the center is the apple, and she, this most beautiful queen, presents it to the king and begs for this favor for a friend of hers. Well, of course the king is going to be more likely to grant the favor. So this analogy is the one that we should apply to our relationship with God. So yes, God is willing to accept our offering, no problem. But by having Our Lady present our offering also to intercede on our behalf, it just makes our petitions so much more effective, so much more fruitful. And this is why we should ask her to intercede on our behalf. Now, as I mentioned, she's the queen of heaven and earth. And when we think of the angelic beings are superior to human beings. In what sense? Well, they are pure spirit, whereas we are a composite of spirit and body. We have a physical body. And because they are spirit, they can be in more than one place at once. They can travel very quickly from one place to another. But they also have a superior intellect. They know things more clearly than we do. They know things more intuitively also, like for example, we have to go through a process of figuring things out, whereas for them, they know instantly. So their ability to know things is greater. Their ability to do things is also greater than our ability to do things, because we're limited by time, we're limited by space in ways that they are not limited. So even the lowest of all the angels is greater than a human being. But imagine the greatest angels. Think of, anyways, the seraphim, the ones that are around the throne of God, they are like the greatest angels. I was going to say Saint Michael and Saint Raphael and Saint Gabriel, but they're actually just archangels, and they're not the highest. I believe it's the seraphim and the cherubim that are the highest. But anyways, so when we say that Mary is the queen of heaven and earth, does that mean that she is queen even over the angelic beings? And the answer is yes. Why? So not that she is greater in her abilities, but she, because of her closeness to God. But you see, God created the angels partially to serve us. And so it's natural for the angels to serve us. They want to serve us. They want to use their power, their abilities, their knowledge to help us. And this is why it's good for us to have a devotion to our guardian angels, to St. Michael, St. Gabriel, and St. Raphael. And those are the only ones that we know by name. Some people say, oh, there's other angels that, and they mention certain names. No, that comes from the apocryphal writings that are not approved by the church. And it might even be dangerous to pray to those angels, because there's no guarantee that those are good angels. Nor should we give a name to our guardian angel, because they already have a name. Okay, so the angels are superior, but they're supposed to serve us. But the angels that rebelled against God, they don't want to serve us. They want to rule it over us. They want to have dominion over us. They want to manipulate us. They want to get us to do what they want us to do. And eventually they want to drag us down into hell, and there they can do all kinds of horrible things to us to torment us. So this desire for power, when we lack love in our lives, when we're insecure, we want power, we want control, we like to control people. This is what they want because they're so insecure. So is Mary the queen of the angelic beings? And the answer is yes. So she can tell them what to do. She can send an angel to help you, for example. And because she's queen of heaven and earth, because she's queen even over the angelic beings, the demons, the fallen angelic beings, recognize this authority that Mary has. So I mentioned that the demons fear Mary more than they fear God, and I pointed out that part of the reason is because they were not able to get Mary to fall, and Mary by her yes conquers the demons and all their influence, but also because she has this role as queen of heaven and earth. In other words, she has authority over the demons, and they can't stand Mary. So whenever Mary is present, the demons flee. Because if she commands them to leave, they must leave, and they know it. And they don't like to obey any human being, and certainly they do not like to obey the Blessed Virgin Mary. So all the more reason for us to have a great devotion to Our Lady and to make her our queen. And we do this by submitting ourselves to her. Yesterday I mentioned the importance of consecrating ourselves to Our Lady, entrusting ourselves to her maternal love for us. So let us do what we can to honor Our Lady and to grow in our devotion, in our union with her.